Okay, everyone, a very warm welcome to the very first in a series of 3 events, Meet the Young Climate Leaders, live on the Scotland and Malawi Partnerships Facebook page, running throughout our Youth Festival week and launching today. These events will be bringing together young leaders working in climate change across Scotland and Malawi. They will be meeting for the very first time through these events, so you'll be witnessing a really special moment when young climate leaders learn about the work that each other is doing and building new bridges, new friendships and connections. This might be the start of new projects and relationships growing out of this meeting today. We're really privileged to be joined by Kelvin, Sofia and Memory today. We have both Kelvin and Memory from Malawi and Sofia from Scotland, and they'll be telling us all about the climate work that they have already been doing. They'll be telling us also about why they got involved and why it's interesting to them. We'll have a presentation from each of them and talking about what they are doing and what they want to see the change in the world. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome our very first speaker. This is Kelvin from Malawi, and I'd love it if you could introduce yourself, Kelvin, and move on to your presentation.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kelvin from Malawi, and I'm one of the massive climate change leaders. So I'm here to present to you my experience in as far as climate change advocacy in secondary schools is concerned. I'll start with how I came to conceptualize this idea of climate change advocacy in secondary schools. At some point in time, I once came across an article by UNICEF on climate change, and in this article, I read that advocacy is an instrument to build a better and stronger future for young people. So this article inspired me a lot, and I said that, okay, if I am to start in doing something on climate change, maybe advocacy would be the perfect thing to do. So I also understand that a lot of people do not venture into climate action simply because they are misinformed, and they also fail to relate to climate change. So I was like, okay, if I am to use advocacy, maybe I might be able to bring some change. So basically, I target secondary school students simply because they constitute a large percentage of the Malawian youths. And I also quoted Dennis Dunning in saying that if we let them, young people will be the world's most powerful solution. Because if we are to empower the youths, they are obviously likely to do greater things. So by this, I was like, okay, let me just target the youth simply because they have the capacity to do greater things. And on top of that, I also know that the youths are they're still in the process of learning. So it's easy for one to communicate with the youth simply because they can easily comprehend the issues that you are trying to teach them. And on top of that, the youths are innovative. And because of this, I try to use this to my advantage simply because if I am to advocate to them about the climate change challenges that we're facing, they're likely to come up with rather more innovative solutions. So that's how I come to choose the secondary school students. On my journey in advocating for climate change in secondary schools, I faced a number of challenges, and one of the challenges was like sourcing relevant information. And by this, I mean that the kind of information that the audience can relate to. You can see that I was like, it was my first time basically going into climate change advocacy, and I was trying to look for something that the students can really like. Let's say maybe when you hear about something and then you'll be able to relate, okay, if the guy is saying this about climate change, am I really experiencing it here in Malawi? So at first, I could not source the actual relevant information, so I had to liaise with other climate change leaders, as well as I was also trained by MASP on how to perfectly implement my advocacy skills. So by that, this challenge was ably solved. And on top of that, I was also challenged with being denied permission to reach out to the students, because most of the secondary school students are in the hands of different institutions. We can say maybe some of the institutions are led by organizations, churches, and the like. So the thing is that firstly, before you do your advocacy activity, you have to go through the proper channels. You have to go out to the headmaster or whoever is in charge of that school. So most of the times, most of the school custodians will tell you that, no, I don't want you to come and do this to my students. Maybe you're trying to insert some kind of rebellious attitudes in the students simply because they could not like clearly understand what were my objectives. And another challenge was that I was faced by lack of interest. Basically, most of the students like they did not have the interest to venture into climate action simply because it was all volunteer based. Okay, the thing is that most of the youths here they are engaged in like in programs that makes them get like some handouts and the like. So if you go to them and tell them that this thing is all volunteer based, they easily lose interest simply because they think that they cannot get anything out of that. And on top of that, most of the youths here also perceive climate change as a hoax simply because maybe they have watched a movie which say that climate change does not exist, or maybe they are reading some articles which also insinuate the same thing. So it was very challenging to reach out to those kind of youths. Yeah, and despite these challenges, I've been like showered with a number of successes, and one of the successes was that out of the 6 secondary schools that I reached out for this year, I have managed to be granted access in about 3 secondary schools. So to me, that's a very great success, and I applaud myself for that. And on top of that, upon meeting with the students, upon meeting with the students from these respective schools, most of the schools seem to have developed interest in climate action. For example, some of them are now engaged in climate action, like planting trees. And on top of that, most of the students have also formed climate clubs, where they discuss different climate change issues. Okay, so to me, that's a success because it simply shows that my advocacy is really working. It's really like bringing something to among the youths. And on top of that, some of the students even asked me that if there are other local organizations local clubs where they can join in so that they can be exposed to a rather wider audience. Okay, so that they can keep on doing a lot of climate actions. So to me, that was very successful, and I was very, very proud of that.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. That was absolutely fascinating to learn about your work. It sounds like it's been a real success against some real challenges. I'm really inspired about that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions in the discussion there. We'll come back to discussion at the end of the Zoom call. I'm very excited now to pass over to the wonderful Sofia from the 2050 Climate Group in Scotland.
Nice to meet you all. I am Sofia. I live in Glasgow in Scotland. Currently, I've been here for more than 5 years, but I was born and raised in Greece. I work as a renewable energy engineer, that's my job, but I also volunteer for the 2050 Climate Group. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today and share part of my story with you. And I'm generally interested in everything that has to do with climate action and trying to be involved, but my work mainly focuses on energy, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. I work in the energy sector, and as I said, in renewable energy specifically. So I want to give some background before on why I think this area is important, and share part of my story with you and tell you what I'm doing. So why is the energy sector so important? Because we all know that we are in a climate crisis, and we know that we can't keep on this same trajectory without having catastrophic consequences for our planet. So we need to take action. We need to reduce our emissions in order to stay below the 2 degrees Celsius. And many countries have pledged the net zero targets, and hopefully in COP26 we'll hear even more ambitious targets. Now, the energy sector is accountable for most of the greenhouse gas emissions currently. So decarbonization of the energy sector is a key solution regarding climate change. And when we talk about energy, we mean it has many parts in our everyday lives. It's our electricity, it's heat, it's transport. It's the energy we use either in our homes or industrial processes. So basically, almost every little thing that we do in our everyday lives involves energy. So we need to make sure we are in the right path for decarbonization. But obviously, when we talk about this decarbonization of the energy sector, we need to make sure that these solutions have in the center the people, and that these solutions are improving actually human lives. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Lisa? So there is often we talk about the energy trilemma, and that involves three different aspects. So first of all, when we talk about energy, we want to make sure that we can establish energy security, and that means reliability and resilience of energy infrastructure, so that we make sure that we can meet the demand, the current demand and the future demand that might be needed. We want to make sure that we have energy equity, obviously have universal access to reliable, affordable and abundant energy for both domestic and commercial use. And at the same time, we want to have environmental sustainability. So we want to make sure that through our energy processes, at the same time, we mitigate and avoid any potential environmental harm and climate change impacts. So renewable energy can play a big role in this, and a very important role in the decarbonization path. But obviously, it's not a magical solution that will radically eliminate all our issues. Renewable energy has its challenges. Some of them are technological. For example, grids were designed back in the day for more traditional fossil fuel generation. So now they might need to take into account this new generation that comes from renewables. There might need to be some upgrades there. And we also have the uncertainty of the generation. For example, we don't know when it's going to be windy or sunny, for example, but that's why there are solutions like storage into place. We also have the cost, mainly the high capital cost that is involved with these technologies, but the levelized cost of energy has been massively driven down over the past few years. And the main challenges, I would say, are how do we basically bring a policy framework together that will drive the market and investments towards a more like renewable energy appetite. So can we move to the next slide, please? So to overcome all these challenges, basically we need to collaborate. We need collaboration from different stakeholders in different sectors and disciplines. So on the one hand, we have the academic sector. So in academia, we know that there is so much amazing advanced research happening that provides innovative solutions. But this is often not bridged with application. At the same time, industry, where the application is, often doesn't have the time to look at the solutions. Often they have to think short term to reduce any costs that are currently involved and reduce any uncertainty. And at the same time, we have the public sector that facilitates, supports, and oversees this whole like transition to net zero by providing all the necessary tools. So when we take a look at like a renewable energy project, there are so many disciplines involved. So we have all these different stakeholders, but we also have all the different parts of the project that affect people's lives. We have community impacts, for example, there might be visual or safety impacts, but also economic impacts on the supply chain, because this might create more jobs. There might be environmental impacts that we have to take into account on wildlife and pollution, and all the technological and green impacts that I mentioned. So basically, that's where my work tries to fit into all of this. So if you can change slide, Luisa, that'd be great. Great. So I studied mechanical engineering when I was back in Greece, and I specialized in energy systems. And then I moved into Scotland because there was a lot of potential for renewable energy, and there are great universities on renewable energy technology. So I got my PhD on wind turbine technology at the University of Strathclyde. And I was really happy to spend a lot of time abroad and learn from different institutions and collaborate with many different people. So I spent some time in academia, and recently I decided to move into the industry. So now I work as an engineer in the industry at a renewable energy company. And at the same time, I volunteer for the 2050 Climate Group, and I'm also a STEM ambassador. So through my work, I'm trying to merge all these different stakeholders and people together. So I'm still working very close with academia and research projects and try to make them more like applicable and with impact on energy and climate change solutions. And I'm also trying, because I am an engineer, and a big part of my work is working on technologies, but I'm trying to have a little bit of a broader perspective and try to work with different disciplines. For example, I work a lot with data and digitalization and new like digital technologies, but I'm also trying through some projects to see how that affects privacy and cybersecurity. So this has to do also with a lot of legal frameworks, and I'm trying to collaborate with people from the sector. And at the same time, through volunteering work, I think, yeah, Kelvin's work on education is amazing. And I'm also trying to be involved in my free time to communicate climate science to the wider public and schools through STEM activities. So there are like organizations that facilitate this and help us basically educate younger people on climate change topics. And through the 2050 Climate Group, I'm really happy to be volunteering there and be engaging with various stakeholders, with NGOs and the public sector, and being involved in events like that. So generally, apart from my day-to-day job, which has to do with renewable energy, I'm trying to encourage discussions and broaden the horizons of my knowledge, and be able to collaborate with others on these issues and exchange knowledge and basically help each other. So yeah, I think this initiative, like Scotland-Malawi partnership, can be very, very fruitful. And yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, feel free to ask my details from the Scotland-Malawi partnership. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sophia. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm absolutely fascinated. I don't know how you have time in your week for all these different roles. It's absolutely amazing. Everything you do. I think you've got an amazing spread across academia, professional engineering, as well as volunteering, and especially being a STEM and ambassador and a 2050 climate leader. Again, I have so many questions for you right now, but we'll keep it for discussion at the end. Let's move swiftly on, and we will speak next to Memory, all the way from Malawi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Memory Lungu. I'm one of the climate change young leaders from Malawi. I'm a teacher by profession, and I also volunteer at Ladies in Tertiary Education as a mentor. It is a pleasure to be here today to share my story. So my interest in climate change is on mitigation measures. We have several of them, but my focus is on solar energy. So to begin with, climate change comes about due to a number of factors, the biggest being human activities. And one of the human activities is burning of fossil fuels, which is used for various purposes like cooking, lighting, heating, and driving machines. So when these fuels are burnt, they release greenhouse gases, which lead to global warming and hence climate change. So as a way to mitigate the effects that comes about because of climate change, we need to use clean sources of energy for various purposes, like in households and in industries. So examples of these clean sources of energy include solar energy, hydropower, and wind energy, just to mention a few. You can move on to the next slide, please. But for the case in Malawi, the immediate source of clean energy is electrical power, which is generated by hydropower. But only about 7 to 12% of the population is connected to the national grid. And in the rural areas, there's only about 2% of electrification, which leaves a bigger gap because electricity is expensive. So mostly it is used for lighting, and for cooking and heating, we have biomass energy that is used in both rural and urban areas. So people in the rural areas, they tend to use candlelight and paraffin lamps for lighting. And when I had a talk with students at a secondary school in the rural area, I asked them what kind of light they use for studying. They say they use the same candlelight and paraffin lamps. So they were complaining that the light is not good for their eyes because when they're studying using it, they have eye strain. And this causes them not to study for longer hours because their eyes eventually get tired. So this eventually led to poor grades in school. So as an educationist, I thought about why not introduce solar light library in the libraries of secondary schools that are found in rural areas. So this initiative is to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases as well as to promote education. So move on to the next slide, please. The next. So the concept is that I placed a few solar lamps in the library of Chiwengas Community Day Secondary School here in Lilongwe. So the students get to borrow the lamps as they're borrowing books, and they get to use the lights to study at night and do their homework. I move on to the next slide. So because these lamps, they use solar energy, which is clean and readily available, it helps to reduce the emission of the greenhouse gases. And also it's there to promote education, because when the students use the light to study, they're able to improve their grades in school. Because if they're using the lights and the paraffin lamps, they don't get to study much at night, which makes them not to perform well in their studies. And to add on, to ensure that the project is sustained, the lamps are lent out at a fee of 20 kwacha. This money is meant to get more solar lamps in the future. Move on to the next. Well, so far the journey has been great. The students are happy with the initiative and they're borrowing the lamps. But in the future, we hope to grow the library, because right now we only have 5 solar lamps, which is not enough to cater for everyone, because we're talking of 100-something students against the 5 lamps. So this is quite a few. So in order to grow the library, we've opened up a request for donations from well wishers, so that together we can grow the library. The next slide. So I'll finish up with this quote by Peter Cohen, which says, "There's no giant step that does it. It's a lot of little steps." So with the little that I'm doing, I hope that sooner or later we're gonna get to where we plan to, like growing the library, so that we're able to reach to as many students as we can across the country, so that everyone can enjoy the benefits. Thank you all for listening. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Memory. What a wonderful presentation, and what an ingenious idea to set up a library where you don't only borrow books, but you can borrow a solar light as well. I think that would be absolutely transformative in terms of educational opportunities, especially for the Malawian rural youth. That's absolutely fascinating. To just kick off a discussion, I would really like to know from the other presenters, is there something that you immediately felt like, when listening to each other, you immediately felt like I want to be involved in that, or that is something I really relate to, or that's something I could help with, or I would like to speak more to one another about that?
I was interested with all the presentations, both by Kelvin and Sofia, but mostly Sofia, because it's like we're doing the same thing, just like different aspects, but we're all in the field of energy. So I think it would be a great idea if we could link up and share on how best we can go about it. Because for me, it's a very small project, but I feel like for Sofia, it's something big. So I know that even though mine is small, but if I get some ideas from her, it would help me to bring up something big as well in the future.
I totally agree with you, Memory. Thanks for the presentation. It was so inspiring. And yeah, your idea is indeed genius. So I think there is a lot of scope for collaboration here. And I think we should exchange a lot of ideas on this and see how we can take this project forward.
Great, wonderful.
Also for Kelvin, I know that there are quite a few people in Scotland that I know of that are working on similar things as you are. So I'll be happy to bring you in touch as well.
And for Kelvin as well. In the first place, before I ventured into this whole energy thing, I was also doing advocacy. Like I said, I'm a teacher, so I tried to open a club at my school. But then, as one of the challenges he mentioned about lack of interest, I battled with that. So I was like, no, I cannot do this. But with his ideas, I think we can also link up to revamp the club that was already there, because now it's inactive. So with your ideas, I think we can work together and bring something up.
So it's been absolutely wonderful to host our 3 climate leaders today, 3 leaders from extremely diverse backgrounds. It's been wonderful to hear about your projects. I think there's going to be so many questions that erupt on the Facebook as people sort of dribble into watching the live video as time goes on. It's been a pleasure, and this is very much the beginning and not the end. Thank you so much for joining today, and we'll be in touch. And on behalf of Scotland Malawi Partnership, we can't thank you enough for your time and your preparation.